pushing you through the environment. But if we wanted, we could allow you to freely walk around the environment. We could allow you to use the hand tracking tools to open each of those cabinets, to pick things up, lift them up, throw them at somebody, operate push buttons and operate the spaceship. Sky's the limit. So why is this amazing? Well, let's look at the definition of VR from Wikipedia. Virtual reality replicates an environment that simulates physical presence, we'll come back to this, in places in the real world or imagined world, and lets the user interact in that world. Virtual realities artificially create sensory experiences, which can include hearing, sight, touch, and smell. VR is not new. It's been around for almost 50 years. And even then, they knew that interaction in the virtual environment and the environment reacting to your interaction was key to developing a sense of presence, this golden chalice of VR. So what is presence? There's several definitions floating around out there, and I encourage you all to go out and research them for yourselves. But this is the one that Oculus quotes from Matthew Lumbert, and I also like. Presence is a psychological state of subjective perception in which, even though part or all of the individual's current experience is generated by technology, part or all of the individual's perception fails to accurately acknowledge the role of the technology in the experience. So the user is so immersed in the content that they're able to suspend disbelief that they are not, in fact, in a simulation. Well, what does this mean? So in the early days of VR, they had this thing called the duck test, which basically measured if you were present in a simulation by someone hurling a virtual ball at your head and seeing if you physically ducked. You suspended disbelief that a virtual ball was coming at your head enough to make you physically duck. Pretty cool. So I like to take this away. In order to make an extremely powerful VR experience, make it seem like the technology powering it has disappeared. So we think we started scratching the surface of this with Game of Thrones, but about 6 months later, we were inspired to take this definition to the next level. For Sundance this past year, we created an experience for Merrill Shoes called Trailscape, which simulated physical presence in the real world, which was a location in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy, that allowed users to interact, move around freely, and use all of their senses to get a truly unprecedented virtual reality experience. As in Game of Thrones, we created a physical environment to match the virtual one, but this time we actually let people freely move around and explore the environment. On top of that, as you move through the environment, the experience dynamically reacted to your presence. Before the Vive and some of the other motion-tracked headsets were announced, we used our experience in VFX to hook up an entire motion capture facility in order to track a 30 by 10 foot volume of motion to allow people to walk around freely with minimal latency. Latency is that thing that makes you feel motion sick when you move your head around quickly in VR and the environment, the virtual environment, doesn't catch up. And it's probably one of the biggest hurdles in VR. In this experience, we allowed users to walk down a wobbly rope bridge, and everything was synced up perfectly. As you reached each stanchion in the virtual rope bridge, the physical one was there as well. And when you reached the end of the bridge, the floor underneath you would begin to rumble, and it would trigger a giant rock fall, taking out the entire rope bridge, forcing you to walk along a steep ledge to a summit. And if you didn't move quick enough, our trusty guide would chime in and guide you to the next step. The results here were unprecedented. I've watched every single one of our experiences launch, and I'd never seen reactions like this before. I mentioned the duck test. We had our own sort of duck test in the Merrill experience. In the actual physical rope bridge, there was a giant gaping hole in it. I mean, in the virtual rope bridge, there was a giant gaping hole in it. In the physical one, it was flat because we don't like lawsuits. And every single person stepped over the gap. Nobody believed they were literally in Italy, but they were having such a great time in there, and it was so visceral that they suspended disbelief just enough to step over the gap. This is not the experience that we did with the most measurable ROI, as it was designed exclusively for the Sundance crowd, but it was the most powerful. It was the most memorable. We didn't just show a passive experience. We allowed them to participate actively in the experience, and we emotionally connected with them. And thus, we created a memory for them. How many other forms of advertising can give you that? I'd argue that telling your brand story through one powerful interactive experience like Merrill makes more of an impression than a million passive ones. So let's wrap this up with storytelling, because everyone keeps asking me, Christine, is this the future of storytelling? Well, as humans, we found ways to tell stories since time started, and technology has allowed us to evolve our methods for doing so. And as we start to get desensitized to all the existing content out there, we look for ways to make leaps towards taking ourselves even closer to the story. People aren't engaging with traditional advertising. You know this as well as I do. And they're becoming highly desensitized. So it's obvious that advertisers are jumping on the VR bandwagon in an effort to bring people closer to their brands. And advertisers have a history of jumping on new technology. They were the first to harness the power of radio and TV, and they quickly jumped onto the internet and mobile platforms. And think about it. Each of these mediums started out by replicating the ones before it. Early TV broadcasts just seemed like radio broadcasts, read on air. And it wasn't until we started making compelling content that was native to each of these mediums that they really started to take off. So why am I still reading TV scripts for VR? Well, let's go back to Zach and the sexy sat phone one last time. Back then, mobile phones were only thought about to do exactly one thing: make calls while you were on the go. Very literal, right? Well, that's how we're thinking about VR right now. You're literally in Hawaii. You're literally skydiving. You're literally driving a car. You're literally Beyonce. But that's okay. Remember this. In this 50-second first stab at filmmaking, the train was literally coming through the station. And over 100 years later, we've developed a language and an art form of filmmaking that progresses a story in a 16:9 rectangle. And as advertisers, you've developed an art form of telling a story in 30 seconds in a 16:9 rectangle. Back then, there was no barometer for quality. It was new, it was exciting, there was nothing to compare it to. That's all people cared about. And as more was made, it started to evolve. Only a mere 7 years later, Georges Méliès was using his imagination to stretch the boundaries of filmgoers' imaginations and show us things that could only be done on a piece of film projected onto a rectangle. So what can be done in 360 degrees, 3 dimensions, on a platform powered by a computing device? What are we going to do that's native to that? It's a big question, but I can guarantee if you start thinking about the user first and what's going to compel, excite, and evoke emotion, you'll start to go down the right road. Remember, it has to be valuable for them. Of all the projects that we've done, I chose to highlight these 2 experiences because they were the ones we were allowed the leeway by our partners to really think about the user first. We not only pushed the boundaries of what was available in VR at the time, but we made the case to push all those marketing strategies, goals, and ROI to the back and focus on telling a compelling brand story by letting the user experience it firsthand. VR is something that needs to be experienced to be understood. And to understand, you have to understand the user's psychology. One of the best quotes I've heard about storytelling in VR is someone quoting a Pulitzer Prize-winning videographer from the New York Times, Ben Solomon. And he says, "Shooting VR versus shooting traditional video is the difference between hunting with a rifle